Americans for Prosperity is committed to breaking barriers across the country, and Americans for Prosperity is growing across North Dakota. By calling on lawmakers to reduce taxes, spend less, improve health care, and provide second chances, we can empower all North Dakotans to rise. We're fighting for you. Join us today so we can make North Dakota the best state to live, work, and raise a family. Americans for Prosperity paid for this ad. Well, the coronavirus has us all living our lives a little bit differently these days. And one of the ways in which we're living our lives differently is that our economy is essentially shut down. And now I say that, there's still a lot going on. I mean, obviously grocery stores, some retail stores are open, but in order to minimize the impact of the virus, in order to stop its spread, to bend the curve or to flatten the curve, I guess is what so many people are saying, that phrase that we hear ad nauseum, frankly, at this point. I'd like to talk about something else, anything else. But in order to achieve that, we are, a lot of businesses are closed. A lot of types of social restrictions are in place. And in our state, a lot of it's been suggestion. I mean, obviously businesses in that are shut down by order, but, a lot of it's been by choice, right? Our public health officials urging people to choose not to congregate in large crowds and things like that. And I think, judging by our numbers, I mean, people have died from this, so I want to minimize this. I don't want to make it sound like it's not a big deal, but North Dakota's doing pretty well, I think, as measured by other places. Still, there is some growing pushback. A group of lawmakers, what is it? A little over 2 weeks ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago now, a group of lawmakers sent Governor Doug Burgum a letter asking that he rescind or at least allow to expire some of his executive orders restricting businesses and whatnot. Now we're seeing pushback where some people are saying there's a lawsuit filed by a nursing home in Minot, where I live, arguing that the governor's restriction on their in-facility beauty parlor is they're basically challenging that in court. I'm not familiar with the legal arguments they're making. I haven't read the filings or anything like that. And now my guest, State Representative Luke Simons, a Republican from Dickinson, is saying that he's going to reopen his barbershop on Friday. And he doesn't really care what the governor does with his Well, I don't want to put words in Luke's mouth. Let's just go to you, Luke. Why are you told me right before we began recording that you were planning on reopening your barbershop on Friday. Why?
Well, that's not originally, but now the governor did say that he was going to open up on the 1st. And I have been watching what's been happening countrywide, and you have Bill Gates running around saying that we aren't going to open up until June or July, and I have been watching our governor, and our governor has basically been going along with what everybody else has been doing. So I just decided I've honored his position. I respected what he's done, even though I disagree. I mean, Article 1, Section 7 is pretty clear in the Constitution that I have a right to, operate my business unmolested by the government in state North Dakota Constitution. And I just decided enough is enough, and I'm going to open up, and I don't care if he's the governor, and I don't care if he's a billionaire. I do not care. I'm going to practice being a free person. Just that simple. If I go to jail, there are certain things I've taught my children. There are certain things that are honorable to go to jail for. In fact, I would say that Martin Luther King, when he went to jail, that was an honorable thing for him to go to jail. He one time said, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Martin Luther King said that. One of my heroes, Gandhi, another hero, when a law is unjust, it is not only right, it is right to disobey it. Thomas Jefferson, if a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so. And that's how I feel. This has gone on long enough. We are at one study I read was 0.03% 0.3% of people that catch this COVID-19 it'll be fatal for them. 0.3. Another one was 0.2%. This is not an epidemic. Epidemic is a word. That word has got terms to it, and that term has not been. That crisis point has not been met yet. This is not an epidemic.
I want to unpack some of what you told me here. First of all, you said that our governor has basically been going along with what everyone else is doing, but in fact, he actually got a lot of criticism. I mean, because North Dakota has not gone nearly as far as some other states. And in fact has been criticized as North Dakota being just one of few states. There was online petitions and a lot of headlines and everything else where North Dakota is one of the few states that hadn't issued, along with like South Dakota, had not issued a quote unquote shelter in place order. So I don't know. I mean, is that fair to say? Because I don't think he has. I'll
rephrase that because you're right. Mr. Port, I agree with you. For the most part, I actually think he's doing a pretty good job. Even though I do believe that coming down on some businesses and leaving other businesses is still picking winners and losers. And shutting our economy down, there's a lot of people in unemployment. Have you been following how broke North Dakota is in our unemployment office? In 3 weeks, we spent more than we did in 3 years. We are broke. People need to go back to work. They need to go back. And the phone calls I'm getting, this is off the subject of me opening up my shop regardless. The phone calls I'm getting, employers are calling me and saying, hey, my guys aren't coming back to work. I was like, why is that? And they're making more money on unemployment. The federal government would screw up about anything. The government is the problem. And now with them giving out more money on unemployment, I'm sitting there thinking, what in the world is going on? Mr. Port, people on welfare are getting $1,200 for what? For what? Their checks have not changed. They're on a fixed income. They're getting $1,200 from the government. The largest government bailout is happening right before our eyes. And why? Why are these people getting that money? I would question why any of us are getting money, but the only people that should be getting any money is the ones that don't qualify for anything. Instead, everybody in the United States, unless you make too much money, is getting this stimulus. And I'm sitting there thinking, is anybody paying attention? Is anybody out there wondering about this? If you're on unemployment, why would you be getting the $1,200? Why?
Do you feel, because one thing you said for the most part I actually think he's doing a pretty good job of Governor Burgum, but then you also read to me quotes from Martin Luther King and Gandhi and everything talking about unjust laws. Now you said that, and I think everybody would agree, this is going to be economically devastating for North Dakota. It already has been. On any norm, but prior to this going on any normal day, we would see about 80 filings for unemployment across the state. And now we're in a position where we're seeing thousands daily. And not to mention the fact of what this is doing to the oil industry. Our state is very dependent on economic activity driven by oil. It's an ugly, ugly thing. But to use quotes that are about unjust laws in response to Governor Burgum's shutdown is to suggest that he's doing an injustice. What do you think would be motivating him? Because I don't think Governor Burgum wants our economy to tank any more than anything else. Do you think he's motivated by a desire for injustice? What do you think is motivating him?
Heavens no. I think Governor Burgum is a very smart man. I think he's a good man. I don't think that he's ill-willed like that at all. I think he has bought the medicine, just like President Trump did. President Trump said from the beginning, the cure could be worse than the disease, and it certainly is. When you start saying, hey, I have a grandmother, which I do, and you don't care about my grandmother, this could be an epidemic like of times of old. Hey, I get it. People make emotionally based. You and I have had conversations over the years about emotionally based laws, knee-jerk reactions. And I believe that's exactly where we're at. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Well, show me where the sky is falling. Any country, show me.
Do you think we ever should have gone? Because, there was part of the problem as we move forward with this is that there's going to be a lot of 2020 hindsight. Our leaders like Governor Burgum are tasked with making decisions about a situation like this in real time. They don't have the benefit of looking back and seeing what has happened. They had to make them thinking about the implications going forward, and they had to do it in real time with imperfect information. You rolled the timeline back on this 3 weeks, a month. We didn't know a lot. We know a lot more now than we did then. Do you think but knowing that, do you think we ever should have shut down? Should Governor Burgum have ever issued this orders, or are you arguing that they've just gone on too long?
Well, that's a good question. I would say both, because South Dakota showed conservative leadership. Other countries did nothing, and they're having the same exact results as other places that have shut their economies down completely. So,
give me some examples. What are these other places that did nothing?
I would have to look into this a little deeper right now. I was just reading an article. It's not Sweden. It's I have it posted on my Facebook page. They did not Sweden. It wasn't Sweden. It was next to Sweden. They did nothing, and they are having the exact same results as anybody else. So that was my point. South Dakota, people that are principled to the Constitution. When I say conservative, I mean conserving the Constitution. People that are principled to the Constitution, these things we hold true. These truths are just true to us, that you cannot overstep your bounds. You just cannot. You can't live your life for your daughter, Rob. There's no way you can do that. And neither can the governor live my life.
Yeah. What do you think is different between what South Dakota's done and North Dakota's done? Like in terms of practical policies, what's the difference between the two states?
Freedom. She didn't close any businesses down. She did not close any. It is hypocritical for us to shut the doors to our schools and then leave our daycare centers open. Come on. Are we serious? That doesn't make any sense at all. That's shutting some schools down and leaving some schools open. Well, you can call it a school, you can call it whatever you want to. Some of these daycare centers call themselves schools. So that is crazy to think that we are going to close some places down. We're going to leave chiropractors open, but massage therapists have to be closed. This is nuts. This is crazy. Rick Becker one time said somebody can come in and get plastic surgery done, but they can't go get a haircut. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
I certainly think, and again, I would argue that we have gone back and we have made a lot of these decisions on the fly. Normally, when we make public policy, as you know, you're in the legislature, it is a lengthy process, right? It is there's all sorts of testimony. There's all sorts of amendments done. You listen to these people and they point out a problem. You listen to these people over here and they point out a problem. And the law changes and the law evolves and we have a debate. And usually a bill that passes the legislature after months of debating and amendments and everything else looks quite a bit different than it did when it started the session, right? So Governor Burgum is doing this by executive fiat. He's made a lot of decisions about broad policy. And your argument, I agree with you. There's some absurdities that have cropped up. I don't know who to blame with them, because that's the sort of thing when you make policy on the fly. And I don't know any other way to make policy in a situation like this other than on the fly. I, by the way, have been arguing that the legislators need to get to Bismarck so the legislative branch engages on some of this, but perhaps that's a topic for another podcast. But what's something you just said, like, how can we, it is hypocritical to close schools, but leave daycares open. And I'm not an epidemiologist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a rodeo clown blogger. So, but the logic behind it is that if we reduce the number of interactions that people have on a daily basis, right? Because you can't stop them. But if you reduce them and you say, okay, well, the kids aren't going to go to schools, but they are going to go to daycare, that may reduce the number of social interactions that kid has from 100 down to 30, which means 70 less chances to either spread the disease, I guess, if they have it, or to be infected by it. In the aggregate, that makes a difference, doesn't it? I mean, isn't that what we're talking about with bending the curve?
See, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is personal choice and freedom. The governor does not have the executive order to become a dictator and dictate to me my life. I've been called deplorable by some politicians, and now I'm being called non-essential by others. That doesn't make sense. I didn't hire him to be my dad. I hired him to be my governor and to follow the guidelines of the Constitution and the guidelines we as the people set forth and said he was supposed to do as a governor. This is out of his job description. That's how I feel.
Is it though? I mean, because the legislature's given the governor if you look at every one of his executive orders that are on the website, he cites North Dakota law justifying this. He does have this authority. Now, I mean, you just called him a dictator. I mean, in June, he's on the June ballot. He has a challenger, Michael Coachman. I guess if Republicans don't want him to be the nominee, they could vote him out in November, assuming he gets to the June primary, which I think he probably will. North Dakota voters have an opportunity to vote him out. And so he's using powers granted to him by the legislature. You and I may disagree with the way he's wielding them, but he has this power from the legislature, and he could be voted out in November. So how is he a dictator?
Well, the word dictator, what does that mean? The word dictator means when you dictate something to somebody, right? And he is dictating people where they can and cannot go, and he's also dictating to people, which is a violation of the First Amendment of the state of North Dakota's Constitution, and also it is directly goes in the face of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 7, of a people practicing their free business. So the legislature cannot grant anybody power that is over the Constitution. That is impossible to do.
Yeah.
The Constitution is the ultimate supreme law of the land. That's why we are a constitutional republic. We, the people, cannot do anything that's outside the Constitution. The legislature cannot do anything outside the Constitution. And even Governor Burgum, even Donald Trump, is not supposed to do anything outside of the Constitution, which he clearly is. The right of the people to obtain employment wherever possible and to enjoy employment already obtained. Section 7. That is pretty clear that he is breaking the Constitution. So any piece of century code that goes against the original intent of the state of North Dakota is void. That's in our Constitution. And I wish people would take their oath to the Constitution a little bit more serious. And if you ask your state legislator if they read the state Constitution, you'd be shocked of how many don't.
Yeah.
How many don't. Curly Haugen said one time, he had asked somebody when they swore to uphold the Constitution, he said, "Have you read it?" And they said, "Well, actually, no." He said, "Well, you probably should read something that you swore to uphold."
Let me, I agree with you. And this is a tough thing. I wrote earlier on, I don't know if you read the column, but I wrote that choice is better than force, right? Because there were people who were talking about, there's a house party next door. And I argued, are you going to send police into people's houses to break up parties now? people in a situation like this, you have to have the public on board. You have to have the public bought into, hey, this is a real emergency and we need to take steps. But we've always granted the government the ability to act in extreme situations and perhaps even act in ways that are against the Constitution. Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the Republican Party, suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. I guess we could go back and have a debate about whether or not he should have done it, but he did it. You know, we frequently have natural disaster emergencies where people are forced to evacuate from certain areas.
John,
so I can understand the argument that you're making, but we have also
John Adams.
We have
I was just going to mention too, real quick. John Adams made a law that said that you could not speak ill of the government or write bad of the government.
Yeah, the Sedition Act.
It was a Whigs versus, and that's how Thomas Jefferson ended up becoming president. In fact, a reporter went to prison for that. They made a law that
a member of Congress actually went to prison over that, and the reporter was James Thomas Callender, who, by the way, was one of my inspirations to start blogging. So I'm well familiar with these stories that you're talking about.
I know you are.
But I guess a lot of it comes down to what we want as a society. Do we want the government to have the authority to act in extreme situations? Because maybe coronavirus turns out to be not as bad as we thought it was going to be. But I think we can all agree there are diseases out there that could be much, much worse than this. And what if it had turned out to be much worse? Shouldn't the government have this authority to shut things down if need be?
Two different things. Were you for the seatbelt laws or against the seatbelt laws?
I think people should wear their seatbelts. I'm not sure we should write traffic tickets over not wearing them.
See, that's how I feel. I feel that education is key. Yeah. People should wear seatbelts, but
that's my point. Choice, not force.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the same thing holds true if you want to die from an epidemic or not. That's your choice. That's kind of where. That's how I feel about it.
The problem with the problem with something like an epidemic, though, is it's kind of by definition a social thing. Like I don't get to make an individual choice about my relationship with the coronavirus. Circumstances thrust that on me. That's not an individual choice. I don't get to have a choice about whether or not this disease is out there circulating.
Well, just because someone is scared to come out of their home and they're afraid to possibly get sick doesn't mean that trumps the right of me to be able to come out of my home. When we were in war, when we were putting Japanese in concentration camps in the United States, just because it was done once, just because the government said they had the right to do that, doesn't mean they did. That was wrong then, and it was wrong now.
Certainly, we've had these long-standing debates. The Alien and the Sedition Act that you talked about earlier was ultimately overturned through the democratic process. We have upheld imprisoning anti-war protesters in the Schenck decision, which is where the famous crying fire in a movie theater comes from, right? Where we decided that some speech is too dangerous to allow. That was for the most part overturned by the Supreme Court. So we've had these debates where the government's gone too far, and we've rolled it back. I should say that I hope that Governor Burgum reopens some parts of the economy. All right, I think we need to be cautious about it. I think we need to be slow about it. But obviously we've had some businesses operating this entire time. Grocery stores as one example, and for some reason I haven't heard any stories about outbreaks emanating from grocery stores. So what are the characteristics of these businesses where they've been able to operate, and can we emulate those in other businesses, particularly in businesses that might, like yours, a barbershop, where I could make an appointment and maybe you could limit the number of people in the shop at any given time, and you can operate and we can get back to business. I think it's time. I think the time has come. What I am struggling with your argument is that this was somehow a dictatorial power grab from the get-go, and I got to tell you, I think the moves were appropriate when we made them, or when Governor Burgum made them, given what we knew at the time.
Well, no matter what, you can't break your oath to the office. You just cannot do it, and he has no jurisdiction to do so.
Yeah.
Under the Constitution of North Dakota, he has no jurisdiction to do so. You cannot mess with a free people. You are talking to somebody that believes eminent domains are wrong. They're free people. You cannot tread on the rights of the people. The government was made to serve the people and to uphold the people's rights, not the opposite. The government works for me. It is never supposed to come against a free people, ever. And I know you believe the same thing. So my thing is it is out of the role of government to protect me from myself. It is out of the role of the government to do so. That's how I feel.
Yeah, but the problem is the choices that you make in your life, of necessity, intersect other people. I mean, nobody's an island in our society. Everybody has neighbors.
Who's coming into my barbershop by force?
Well, nobody.
Who would come in? Who would come in there by force?
Nobody. But somebody who comes into your barbershop, and if we spread the disease, and the disease has a much larger cost to society than it would otherwise. I think about it this way. Let's try a different example. I am glad that we have a law that says that my neighbor can't blast Motley Crue at 100 decibels at 3 o'clock in the morning. If they do that, the police are going to come, and the police are going to shut them down, as well they should. Now, to use your argument, the government shouldn't act against their liberty to play Motley Crue at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I got to tell you, as that guy's neighbor, I appreciate that law. And by the way, I'm not disparaging my neighbors who do not play Motley Crue at 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's the argument that I'm making is, okay, you want to play Motley Crue at 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to go to sleep. What do we do?
You're talking about city code?
Yeah. It's the law.
Yeah. Well, it's the city code. I mean, it's city code.
And it also allows a police officer to show up at your door and write you a ticket.
Yeah, a police officer is a security guard. That's how that works. I mean, That's what they are. The sheriff.
But I mean, we have laws about that. I mean, we have laws about nuisance laws. We have laws about like noxious weeds. We have laws about mistreating animals. I mean, these are because when you make a decision on some of this stuff, it can impact your neighbors. I guess that's my point is, yes, I absolutely believe in individual liberty, but every individual is a part of society. We have a social contract that we have to uphold, and we can't necessarily get away from. Like it or not, Luke, a lot of times you're going to make decisions in your life that impact people around you.
Well, the French Revolution and the American Revolution, one ended up in a bloodbath, and the other one ended up in freedom. And the reason for that is because you can't have a free republic. Nowhere in the first law of our country did it say thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. It doesn't say that. Why?
Well, because most of us aren't murderers. I have made this exact same argument, right? We were a Christian country, and Christians not 100%.
Not 100%. You're correct, but primarily. And
I don't know that Jefferson was all that Christian, to be honest with you.
You know what? I've been doing some really serious reading. You and I should have a serious conversation about this. Thomas Jefferson was pretty devout Christian.
All right.
When you start to read about it. But anyways, he had some interesting views on Christianity, but so do a lot of people. But the point is some of our founding fathers said, a republic, if you can keep it, and who said it then, right afterwards, he said, a constitutional republic is made holy for a Christian, moral people. It is wholly inadequate for any other. The reason why you have somebody blasting music at nighttime is because they aren't following the golden rule of a constitutional republic. And the golden rule is love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay, but some people just aren't going to do that. And James Madison, if I could paraphrase him, said that if men were angels, we wouldn't need government.
That's correct.
But we do need government because lots of people choose to do things that are at times irresponsible or disrespectful or obviously criminal. Like there are people out there who murder and rape and steal and do all the terrible things, and we have to have a process to establish their guilt and to deal with them. The criminal justice system. But I mean, that's why we have laws, is because not everybody is respectful. Not everybody chooses to do the right thing. I wish people did, but they don't.
And that's exactly it. And the rule book that we set up was the Bill of Rights.
Right.
And that's what all of our laws are supposed to be based off of. And so if they have freedom of speech, they have the freedom to play whatever music they want, in my opinion, whatever time they want, and however loud they probably want. That's how I would read the Constitution. That's how I would read it. Now, you would have the right to walk over there when their hangover is done and say, your race car in the garage or whatever. I live next to a very small town. There is no law there other than, century code and Constitution. But there are no city guidelines there. There's no mayor, no city council. And there's a few people that have some race cars there, and they used to run them up and down the streets, and I get phone calls. I live way out in the country, and they're like, what are you going to do about this? And I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Have you talked to him about it? No. Well, if you haven't talked to him about it, what, are you going to run to the legislature and make a law? What are you going to do? You got to go over there and man up or lady up and go over there and talk to them. Hey, I've got kids here. I remember when I was a kid, I was driving way too fast in a residential area, and this man would yell at us, spray his water hose at us, whatever. And one day he stepped out in front of my car and with a baseball bat, and he came up to my window, dropped his baseball bat, and said, "Sir, you are driving way too fast. You see those little kids there in the yard? They're not smart enough not to go on the street." And he said, "Your bumper is made of solid steel. My little babies their heads would be spread all over this." And his eyes were tearing up, and I was tearing up. I was, 17, 16 years old? I've never sped in town since, I don't think.
Sorry, so let's apply that anecdote to the current situation. There are people who think that you opening your barbershop is going to put people in danger. Now, I realize that, or even maybe just opening up in general, because really the point you're making is not just about your barbershop. You're talking about businesses in general, and there are people who think that if we do that, we are going to put people in danger. So if you open up your barbershop on Friday, can somebody show up with a baseball bat and give you a lecture like that guy did when you were speeding? You think you're okay with that? That's the society that you want to live in?
What I would say is if the governor would come out and just tell me and talk to me and really give people real evidence that there's an epidemic that bigger than 0.3% of people that get it will it could be fatal for them, then at that point the responsibility would be on me. But right now, I will not be told. I will not be told. I went along with what I'm going to call tyranny for a long time now. And the evidence is out. There is no epidemic. The evidence is out. Our hospitals, I'm getting phone calls from doctors, nurses all over the state, because I make myself very available to the people, as I'm supposed to as a statesman, that their hospitals have nobody in them. 0.1% of their office, the hospitals are full. Remember what the idea was, the curve. It's all about the curve. It's all about the curve. Show me the epidemic. Where is the epidemic happening?
What if we argue that we bent the curve, we flattened the curve, we avoided an epidemic, or at least a more pronounced epidemic, because of the very things that you're opposing, what you just described as tyranny?
So how did that work in South Dakota? May 4th in Montana, they're opening up. So I'm on the western side of the state. People can drive to Montana and get a haircut.
Sure.
But they can't get one from my barbershop.
Yeah, I think that's a fair debate going forward, but Montana also shut down. And South Dakota, I think, had in place a lot more restrictions maybe than you're giving them credit for.
Montana's governor stood up pretty bold and strong. It's all over my YouTube or my Facebook page. And
Yeah.
She stood up pretty strong on conservative principles. My thing is do we amend the Constitution, or do we just say we don't really follow the Constitution? As a lawmaker, I swore an oath to the people that I would follow the Constitution. That's what I did.
Oh.
And as such, either I stand up for it, or do we just use it for the shortage of toilet paper that's around? I mean, what's this for? But we are a constitutional republic. Ultimate supreme law of the land lies in the Constitution, not century code. Century code is suggestion that has a copyright on it. The Constitution of North Dakota and the United States are ultimate supreme law of the land. That is the guideline of what people's rights are, what we're supposed to be doing, the proper role of government. And nowadays, it's just like everyone's reading law out of chicken noodle soup for the patriotic soul. That doesn't mean anything. Constitution is everything. That's where we find our answers.
Well, Luke, you and I share a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same hopes and goals. I just think that in this instance, I don't know. This reads to me like, honestly, almost like intransigence. Like I don't understand it, because I think the step maybe that I've taken that you're not taking is that we also live within a society. Every one of us as individuals make decisions that impact the people around us. And we have in place a democratic process with accountability measures for people who are in power to try to negotiate those impacts. I mean, that's a reality of society. But I've kept you long enough. Any last comments? Your plan is to reopen Friday. If they write you tickets, I guess you're going to pay the fines, or maybe not pay the fines?
No, I won't pay the fine.
You won't pay the fine?
I will not. No, I will not pay the fine.
Okay.
No,
all right.
I've taught my children there are some things that are honorable. My family came over on the Mayflower. They signed the Constitution. We fought in the War of Independence. My family also fought against slavery. A lot of my family had died fighting against slavery. My family was in prison fighting against slavery. And I believe in the Constitution of North Dakota and the United States. And nobody in any... I seen a meme the other day, I'm sure you did too. The Founding Fathers were all signing the Constitution. They said, now all this is true unless there's an epidemic. No. I'm sorry. People are smart. I wear my seatbelt because I want to, not because big government tells me to, because my uncle government tells me to. I will not be shamed into giving up my constitutional rights. People have a choice to walk into my door. No one's making them walk into that door. Walmart, Menards, Lowe's, it looks like Christmas every single day. Shields looks like Christmas. The malls are now opened. What's going on? So picking winners and losers, is that the role of government? Is that in the bylaws of the Republican Party? The bylaws of the Republican Party. This is becoming a partisan issue. I mean, almost straight down the road, partisan issue. I mean, I was just talking to a Democrat. I said, are you going to vote for the Democrat governor? And she said, no, all Democrats love our governor. Well, why is that? Why is that? Well, I'll leave it to the people to wonder why that is.
Well, there's accountability. I mean, there'll be a referendum on Governor Burgum's first term in office come November. And if people want different leadership, then I guess they'll have an opportunity to vote for somebody else. Or it will have an opportunity in June as well, with Mr. Burgum facing Mr. Coachman on the June primary ballot. So, Luke, I don't agree with you in this instance, but I wish you well and good luck come Friday.
Thank you, sir, and you have a great day.